Welcome in now, Dylan, Double D Vintage Baseball Cards. So good to see you. I've been so excited to talk to you for the longest time. Dylan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. To hear your voice, because I mean, I know you may not think that you're big time, but to me, as a collector, as a podcast lover, I'm a podcast guy, like much more than YouTube, because at YouTube I mostly listen, like I watch videos, but to hear you, to see your face and your voice, like live, me and you having a conversation, really means a lot to me. I've listened to every single episode of yours. I truly have enjoyed all of them. It's a different perspective, and we collect differently yet the same on some things. So this is going to be really fun, and I really thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor for me.
And same, it reciprocates. Been listening to your stuff a long time as well, and I think the first time I heard you was on Baseball Card Collector as well, and like, man, this guy's enthusiasm is infectious, and it is such. It is, you are, in my opinion, not to blow smoke at you at all. You are the antidote to top 5 cards going up kind of content, right? And I just love it. And for those of you who are watching this, you can obviously see Dylan's wall of cards behind him. It is an inspiration. So thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk cards with you for the next little bit.
Me too.
So you have a large YouTube presence. So why don't you just real quick introduce yourself? Because I'm almost purely audio, where you do a lot on YouTube. So for those in my audience who maybe aren't familiar with you, say hello and talk about your channel and talk about your collection.
All right. Well, my name's Dylan, and I've been collecting cards since I can remember, since 5 years old. Probably started, I tried to like figure it out. I probably started with movie cards out of the vending machines, and then progressed as I played Little League and T-ball into 87 tops was my main jam. My dad used to buy me one pack of cards every person I struck out in Little League. And I've never ever stopped. I'm not one of those guys who took a break because girls in high school. No, in high school I was literally known as the guy who collected baseball cards. My girlfriend then knew I collected baseball cards. Her dad had a little collection, would ask me about them, and I have never gotten out. And I've always been attracted to vintage cards since I was a kid. I remember seeing 58 tops and the big lettering of Hank Aaron and Mickey Mantle, and just being struck by those. And my parents were never into sports. They didn't like baseball. I mean, my dad played baseball with me, like catch, and he helped coach teams, but there was no sports being watched in my house. So I purely did this, found this love, this passion for cards on my own. And I've been I've just dabbled in it forever, and I really went strong at it in the early or the mid '90s, the late '90s, when I was in high school in '96 to '99 or whatever that is. I graduated in '99. I was buying graded cards during that time, and right after that, I was trying to make a living buying graded vintage cards and reselling them, and I went nuts at that. And I ended up getting myself into trouble and having to borrow some money from my Oma and Opa at the time. I didn't realize that you didn't have to pay your credit cards after every month. I thought you had to. I was using a credit card at the time. And because I kept too much. Like I just loved the cards so much that I kept them. So fast forward all the way till now, that I've never stopped collecting. I love everything about it. I went through a period of time in the 90s, and then huge in the 2000s of buying packs and boxes with one of my best friends and opening them up and having the greatest time of spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars like the guys do today when no one was collecting cards. I feel like going to Frank and Sons. If you're familiar, some of your listeners will probably be familiar with Frank and Sons in California. That's where I originally grew up, in Huntington Beach, as a surfer. And I would go out there every Wednesday, I think, and Sundays. I think they had a show, and buying boxes with me and my buddy and opening them up. So I love all cards, and I love cards for the cards themselves. And yes, I read books constantly, or Audible. I listen to them constantly for the last 15, 20 years. I had a job running a CNC machine for 20 years, and I use headphones. So I've consumed every baseball and baseball card book that has ever been made on Audible. Like every single one you could think about, I've listened to. And podcasts like yours, I just really soak all that in. But to me, the love of the card itself is where it's at. It doesn't matter if it's modern, doesn't matter if it's vintage, doesn't matter if it's a movie card, doesn't matter if it's a bird card. I love shark cards. I have a shark collection. I love everything about the card itself, the aesthetics, the design, the history of some of the players. I'm that guy. Like I don't care who's on the card. If it looks cool, that's the card for me. So that's kind of my journey. And as far as my YouTube, Double D Vintage Baseball Cards, I just show my collection. I talk about my brain. I talk about how I'm forming my collection and how I'm changing my collection and how I love opinions. And from day one on making videos, I've been making videos for 3 years. It was all about opinions for me. Like that was why I got on there, because I was like listening to, not you, because you weren't on back then, but the podcast. And I was guy raising my hand and screaming, going, no, wait, what about this? What about this? And I'm like, I want to express myself. And I'm not the guy who knows all about how cards were made. And I don't know about all the, I don't know a lot about the cards themselves. I'm a purist as far as like, I just love cards. It brings me the joy. It's a safe place for me when after a day of work, after surfing, I come into my card room and I lay on the floor and I look up at my cards, and it gives me that butterflies. It gives me that peace and calm no matter what happens during the day. And that's what I get from cards. But I also love value in cards, and I've never been ashamed of that. And I've said it from day one on my videos. It's a marriage for me. When I spend real money that I've worked for, my wife has worked for, on cards, I want them to at least stay at the value that I purchased them at. But in the end game, I have that in my mind. When I buy a card, I want it to become worth more in the future. And I always have the intention of buying a card that becomes worth more in the future. There's always different aspects of that. Obviously, I'll buy a $2 card and it's never going to be worth anything because it's cool. I have those side PCs. I have those different aspects of collecting. But for the real money cards, I have that intention. I believe when I buy a card that I'm doing it the correct way and I'm buying the correct one that will go up in value. But, in the end, it really doesn't matter because I get the enjoyment of the card the whole time. And when we have a bust in this hobby and it goes down south, like I've seen that happen all my collecting life. When no one else is collecting cards, I'm still collecting cards. I'm still gonna go after that in my brain. Like, all right, well, what can I buy now in this downturn? What can I really enjoy? And if my cards lose value in that time, I don't sweat it. I don't think about it. It's when I get it and I love the card, it's in my collection. It's there for life unless I go through some kind of change like I did with my off-centered stuff. I sold all my off-centered high grades over the last 2.5 years and I went for eye appeal, strictly eye appeal. Didn't matter if it's a high grade, low grade, mid grade. That's where my collection changed. So I go through changes like all of us, but that's me in a nutshell. I love collecting. As a collector, it's my grandma Pat. She was a hoarder collector, and when I go to her house, she had stacks of Barbies 8 feet high in her living room. You couldn't even go upstairs because there were magazine stacks all the way up. So whether that's in my blood, I don't know. My dad wasn't a collector. I have a small comic book collection from him, but I just, whatever happened in my life, I guess my best friend back then, his name was Dave Windsor. His house was a museum. His mom and dad were collectors, and she had a doll collection. Her whole house was filled, like you see behind me, all dolls, the entire house. And his dad collected clocks. So we'd spend the night, and cuckoo clocks would go off every hour. And it was just a place, like I walk into their house, it's a museum. To this day, they're both still alive. I go back to California and I visit that house, and it blows my mind. So whatever that is, whatever the collecting gene is, whatever the collecting influence I had through my life, that's collecting for me. It's that peace, it's that joy. That's what I get out of it. So that's me in a nutshell. I hope I didn't go too long. There you go.
No, that's great. So you were talking about how, you like ultra modern, you like modern, you like baseball cards, you love vintage. I know you have all these other interests. How do you put, or do you put some sort of unofficial type structures in place to make sure that you're not grabbing everything, and instead are grabbing the types of things that you do like, that are aesthetically pleasing, that are historically pleasing, that are nostalgically pleasing? Do you have some sort of rules type in place? How do you sort of whittle that down so that you don't buy everything in your line of sight?
Well, of course I have rules. As a collector, if you don't have rules, you just end up with you're a hoarder. And there's nothing wrong with that. Collectors can be hoarders. Like, you can consider me a hoarder, but I'm an organized hoarder. But I'm a collector. So yes, I have rules. And for the modern thing, I didn't start specifically collecting modern, until about a year and a half ago, I think it was. I purchased a Mickey Mantle. I think it was at 59. It wasn't his base card. It was like it hit a home run in the World Series. And I actually still don't have that card, but it was a $35 purchase. It was a 3 or something. And a Mike Trout got shipped to me. And it was a Bowman Mike Trout gold Bowman. And I look and I go, wait, what is this? I didn't order this. And so I looked at it, I put it on my desk, and I go, dude, this card is super sick. And this was after the crash. So all that stuff took off to the moon, and I hadn't collected the modern stuff yet. I was selling all that stuff I used to open. I tried to make a living selling cards on eBay for years. And so I had, thousands and thousands of modern cards listed on eBay, but I hadn't. Every year I buy one case of modern. That's what I always did for Christmas. But I hadn't collected it, so to speak. And when I got that card, a thing clicked in my brain, and that was after everything crashed. And so I go, if I'm going to start collecting modern, now's the time. So I went through my brain and I go, well, how am I going to do this? So I reached out to that seller, and it was a wash. It was like a $30 card. And he goes, yeah, just keep that. I go, I'll keep this Trout, and you can, you don't have to reship the card. I have to send this back. He goes, all right, deal. Sounds good. And so I kept that Trout, and I'm an Angels fan. I grew up by Angels, in Huntington Beach, California. So I'm an Angels fan. I've always wanted to collect Mike Trouts, but I was a vintage guy. And when Mike Trout, all that stuff boomed, I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I would never touch that stuff. And then it all crashed, came tumbling down 100, 150%, 200%, whatever. That's when I said, I'm in. And that card did it. So yes, I came up with rules in my head. What I did was, as a collector, for me, marriage with the value, trying to make my collection become worth more in the future. It's not that difficult to figure out what lane to go down. I know cards, and I knew gold because of what it was in 91, 92. They had like gold winners, and you could send these. My buddy Dave, who I talked about earlier, his family used to buy boxes, and they would fill out those forms, and they'd get the gold winners in the mail. I never did that, and so the only ways I had those golds was through him. And then they started putting in golds in packs. Either 91, 92, and then 93 they really put them in packs.
First Topps gold, the first parallel, right? Of course.
Totally, yeah. Exactly. So my brain was going, well, gold. Who doesn't love gold? Everyone loves gold and everything. So 2001 is when they started the gold numbering system to the year. And so my brain instantly went, well, I'm going to collect one Mike Trout gold from every year. And I had the Bowman Chrome, the Bowman, regular Bowman paper gold. That's the one I got. Well, I wanted to do Topps. So I started buying every single one of Mike Trout of the numbered year. And I have the whole collection. including his rookie year. I bought the gold, number to 2001. I'm like, why would I buy my brain? Why would I buy base? Because there's millions of them. And at that time, the base was $2,000 for the PSA 10. And the gold at a PSA 9 or a 9 was $2,000 as well. And I go, why would I get the base when there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them? To me, I always just like, how is this card worth this much to begin with? Like, it's a base card. It made no sense to me as a collector all these years and buying modern, opening modern, not collecting it, seeing these base cards. How is Mike Trout's card even worth that much to begin with? Well, during that time, people didn't really collect cards. I was like I felt like I was the only collector in the world collecting cards. He kind of brought cards back. Obviously, there were zones where like Kobe came in and he brought cards back. 2001, that brought some collectors as well because of Pujols and Ichiro really in 2001. But so my brain instantly went to golds. So yes, I stuck to that lane and I felt really confident in it. Like I'd buy his PSA 9s all the way through there. They start a little more expensive with his rookie. It was like $2,000, I think I paid. It's probably a $1,600 card now, maybe even less. I don't care. It doesn't matter. They went down since, then he got hurt. Went down a little more. Still have it. Bought every single one of his all the way up to today, and they're like probably $25 to $35 for a 9 every season. And then I got a little deeper into modern, and I started making rules going a little deeper. So now, fast forward all the way to now, I collect, to give everyone a clue, I collect Aaron Judge. And I started collecting Aaron Judge because my nephew was a fan of Aaron Judge.
That's cool.
And I'm like, yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer because I started collecting him when he hit the 62 home runs. He beat my favorite home run record of all time, which is Roger Maris. And I'm a huge Roger Maris collector. Like, I love Roger Maris since I was a kid. Like, one of the first graded vintage cards I ever bought was a Roger Maris rookie card. And so I started making rules for going a little off the Mike Trout train, but I had to make rules. So I started collecting golds, Topps Chrome. I love Topps Chrome. So I collect all Topps Chromes numbered to 50. Mike Trout, Ichiro, Pujols, and Aaron Judge. But here's my parameters. If I open this thing up behind you, you would see about 7 albums of modern cards, and the albums are filled with graded cards. I have Bowman Chrome, Topps Gilded Chrome, and Topps Heritage, and Topps Finest. I allow myself, I want one refractor from every single year they've been out. So Topps Finest, 1993, all the way till present day, and I want the rare refractors. In the beginning, 93, I just want the regular refractor. 94 regular, 95 regular, but then there's golds. So that's how I'm taking my modern collection. I want the harder to find stuff. I want the stuff because I open this stuff. I spent over 30 grand one year opening packs and selling them. I one year I sold $20,000 on eBay of cards that I had opened because me and my buddy, we were in our prime of our lives in our 20s and making good money. I had a full-time job. I didn't go to college, so I was working full-time. I know how hard this stuff was to pull, so now I buy that stuff. And after that big crash, it made it affordable, and they're back to the prices they were before that boom, and I'm having a blast. But yes, I have parameters. Yes, I have rules. If you don't, it gets crazy. And I did go down a path of some rainbows in the beginning. I probably bought about 20 or so modern cards that I've sold or are in my box to sell of Mike Trout that I wish I wouldn't have purchased. But it's a learning phase and everyone goes through it. But, you get a little aggressive. I don't need every rainbow, but I do have rainbows of certain players like Mickey Mantle Modern. That's another one I'm collecting, all his rare stuff. When Topps made it his card number 7 in the base cards, they made that his number. And for a year from 1996 to 2012, they put Mickey Mantle at card number 7 in the base cards for Topps Chrome and Topps. And then after that, they literally didn't even put card number 7 in sets. They took it out. So you can't even have a card number 7 in Topps for a certain time. Now they have his license again. I'm not collecting his his new stuff. I only collect his stuff from that period, and I'm collecting the hard to find, the stuff that is one in every 500 packs. So that's my rules.
Yeah,
A long way to say those are my rules.
and that's one of the reasons that I was really eager to talk with you is I heard you. I think it was with Adam on Turn Back the Clock with the Splendid Sports network that he's got going, and it was really refreshing because your passion, your interest, your collection of vintage is aspirational. But then to also hear you talking about you've got trout. I've got family in Fullerton, California, Orange County as well. So Angels fans, I get it. But to hear you putting it with it, it was violating one of the there's unwritten rules of baseball. There also are, which are silly sometimes, but there also are unwritten rules of sports cards.
That's more of the unwritten rule.
Right. One of them being is, are you a vintage collector or are you a modern collector? Not just, are you a baseball card collector or whatever types of sports card collector? I think it's probably not as confrontational as I've made it out to be in my head, but there are certainly people who will stake out their spot, right? Where they are, if they are ultra modern, they will put down vintage saying, well, it's actually way more common than you realize, right? That the pop count is way more than you realize. Or somebody is purely vintage and it's like, they'll start making fun of random parallels. That's
manufactured scarcity. That's the number one
manufactured scarcity, right?
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, let me see your fuchsia wave plaid to 98 or whatever. It's like, I don't like that either. I like modern cards. How do you what do you think of that philosophy of you have to be either or?
Well, it's silly. I mean, quite frankly, it makes absolutely no sense. I collect baseball cards. From the very first time I got on YouTube, I've never been anti-modern cards. I just didn't collect them. I dealt with them on a daily basis. I have my eBay boxes right here. I have thousands of modern cards that I was selling at the time, but now it's like, I don't understand the argument. Like, why most people aren't like that. Okay. Like I'm friends with mostly vintage collectors. Okay. But most of those vintage collectors collect modern cards. They just don't show them on their channel. They don't talk about them a lot, but they still collect them. But there's guys that are completely anti, that don't want it. But no one I know is mean about it. No one like poo-poos it or anything like that. In fact, they just, they'll jab you or have fun with it. That's the world I'm in. I don't associate with the people who are just angry about some guy who's collecting modern or some guy who's collecting vintage. They are freaking cardboard baseball cards. Why is there a divide? You can collect both. I love nothing more. I'll show you a card right now. If you're listening, I have a Topps Gilded Jackie Robinson right here. It is a beautiful modern card in hand. The thing is beautiful and shiny. It's manufactured scarcity. It has a print number on it. It's stamped. But it's Jackie Robinson. So vintage for me, like I get to collect a Jackie Robinson on a design from 2024. How much more fun can you have as a collector? And if you're a vintage guy and you're like, that's just gross, it's manufactured scarcity. Everything's manufactured at some point. And it is proven fact that manufactured scarcity in cards has a place in our hobby and does grow in value over time if you choose correctly. And you can look at the 90s. You can look at those manufactured scarcity. If you collected 90s cards only over the last 10 years, you would be killing it on a financial level on your pickups because they're manufactured scarcity. You would also be killing it if you collected pre-war or vintage cards. It doesn't matter. If you're a collector and you love collecting, you should respect everyone's opinions about their collection. Now, I collect for my own collection. Now, I say this all the time. I'm 100% right in everything that comes out of my mouth because I'm collecting for me. I'm not collecting your collection. And when I say my opinions, they're my opinions, but I'm not going to be like, I'll tell you you're wrong, or my brain will tell you you're wrong about your collection, but you're collecting for you. I'm not going to tell you in a way that's mean. And most of the time, I'm not going to tell you because it's just in my brain. Like, I'll watch a video and I'll be like, I'll watch it and I'll enjoy someone's passion for sharing that card. But in my own brain, I'm like, I would never buy that card. That's insane. That's in my brain, that's just dumb. But it isn't dumb if it's for you. My collection wouldn't work for other people. The way I do my vintage cards is stupid for most people. The way I do my modern cards is stupid. It is for me, and it's for my brain to spit out what I think is going to give me the most joy and become worth the most money in the future. I'm always looking in the future, and I'm always looking in the present. I'm looking at what's going to bring me the joy at the moment and bring that joy all the way into the future and become worth more. I'm always right in my brain, and you're, as a collector at home listening, you're always right in your collection the way you're doing it. And I can't stress enough, there's no such thing as a professional collector. We are collecting, we are just accumulating items. I don't understand the whole, a lot of people get really, there's the professional collector. There's the Jeff Wilsons of the world who people look at. He is not a professional collector. And no shade against Jeff Wilson. He loves cards. He has a passion for cards. And I only single him out because everyone knows who he is. And I have nothing against him. What I have against the hobby in general, the mindset, is the negativity of literally talking really down on someone for their collection. Just because I think someone's wrong about something doesn't mean I'm gonna get mad at them for doing it. And they're not wrong if it brings them joy, and if they think that that's the correct way of doing it. I've been wrong about many investments in my life, many things in my life, and that includes cards as well. But in the moment, and as I'm collecting them, I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Is we defend our own collections, whether it's modern or vintage. That's what we do as collectors, and that's how we go about things. So I think we all need to focus on our own collections more, and whether it's vintage or modern, there's a place for it in your collection. And that's, I know a friend, his name is Orlando, a collector's dream on YouTube. This guy, he's an amazing human, the nicest human you'll ever meet. I've met him in the flesh numerous times. We're great friends. I would have never dreamed in a million years this guy would ever pick up a modern card and say, "This is beautiful. I love this card." Well, he just decided to collect Mickey Mantle modern cards. And I don't know if I inspired him or what. I assume I did, but he's a Mantle collector. And now he's looking at him. And I just sent him a couple really epic cards. I don't want to share it in case he listens to this and he hasn't got them yet. Well, and they're super sick to get it going. This guy was a full blown, he's a vintage guy all the way. And now he loves the modern. He's like, "This is sick." That's what I love. And that's what I want to stress. That's what I want to inspire. What are your thoughts? Like, what have you, like, the divisions? I'm sure you hear comments and you see it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes there's the vocal minority, and there's the old squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I think there are a lot more people in the hobby who are supportive and don't care than there are
Of course.
those who are, for whatever reason, will put down others. And I tend to think that there's two primary reasons why somebody would put down some other person's collection. One, an insecurity in their own, or two, it would be they're trying to gain something by boosting up their own. I don't know why they would do that, but I'm sure that it's usually financial based, or who knows what the reason would be. I love, to me, there's one through line with cards, right? Like I know there's eras, there's pre-war, and then there's vintage, and then there's junk, and there's everything else, but you can see through lines all the way through it. There's no hard stop. It's why there's a debate over things like when actually is vintage, right? Oh, it ends in 1980 when there was, the last time there was just one set in Ricky Henderson. No, now goes through 84. It's all cards, right? It's why, I love the term pastiche, right? Pastiche, that's what Topps Heritage cards are. They look like vintage cards, but they have modern sensibilities. They have chromium, they have refractors, they have the parallels, but they still have the look. And I have a card here in front of me. It's a 2020 Stadium Club variation of Ohtani here. So if you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a paper card. It's his variation. He's sitting in the dugout. He's talking to someone. He's got his hand out, waiting for someone to walk by to slap him 5. And it is shaded in the same way as the 53 Bowman Stan Musial, where he's in the dugout and he's smiling, right? And he's looking the other way. And you can picture the two of them conversing. There you go. There's your copy of it right behind you, right? But it looks like it was shot by the same photographer 70 years apart. And one's vintage, one's modern, but they connect. And I think if you don't have to look very hard to find those connections. If you look hard enough, the 2014 Mookie Betts rookie variation, he's in the dugout, right? The 2018 Juan Soto SP, where he's got his hands on the hips, he's in the dugout. There's that green hue of the dugout of what it looks like. It just kind of, it connects them all. Allen and Ginter wouldn't be as popular as it is today if it didn't connect to the past. And I keep waiting for Old Judge to come back. Maybe that will as well, and Gypsy Queen and whatnot. There are certain things I don't like, but to each their own, right? I've never said this out loud on a podcast, but I don't get the lure of autographs. I just don't. I don't understand it. If it comes in a pack, you didn't get it. If you buy it, an in-person one, you probably didn't get it. If it's from someone who's in their past, but people love it, and that's great. And I love that someone has found a thing. I am in the camp that should they be marking this card as altered? They grade it because that's not how the card looks. But people love autographs, and if we pushed autographs out of the hobby, then you push a lot of really cool people out of the hobby. And when you see someone like Bleecker Street and that incredible Hall of Fame autograph set or autograph collection he's putting together of, Jackie Robinson autos and Satchel Paige, and that's necessary, right? That makes the hobby fuller, and that is keeping history alive. So, when somebody starts getting critical of something, I just kind of roll my eyes.
Well, Dave, let me make you laugh really hard right now. Mm-hmm. So you saying the autograph thing, I literally the crown jewel of my entire collection I just purchased, and it is an autograph, which is freaking hilarious because I'm not an autograph guy. I'm a pack pull autograph only. Mm-hmm. And then also on my vintage ones, they have to be very specific they have to be very specific. Well, I found a card that just blew my absolute mind, and it's an autograph card, and that's so funny. I'm not offended. I totally understandable. You're not collecting my collection.
Right. Yeah. That's fantastic. I realize that's a problem with me, right? Not with
exactly.
Somebody. Yeah. Someone, I could be pulling up, here's another card. This is a 07 Topps Chrome Red Refractor of Chris Carpenter, right? I love this Cardinal pitcher. Great. And somebody else might look at this and they might think to themselves, so it's the same as a base card, but you paid more because it's red. Like, yep. And as soon as they say that, I completely get their skepticism on it, right? But I love that we are unique. I love seeing people's collections. And one of my favorite things to do, people call scrolling on Instagram doom scrolling, but I do it just to appreciate what people have. I love seeing sets that people have. I already mentioned Bleecker Street, right? His autograph collection is amazing. And it is, to me, sort of redeems it. And I can see the beauty in someone's autograph collection. And it's not for me, but it is for others. And it's amazing.
Well, it's good to hear you let loose a little bit. You got to let those lips loose. There's nothing wrong with not liking someone else's collection because it's not yours, but it's the way you go about saying it. You're not pointing at them. You're not yelling at them. You're not being mean about it. This is collecting. We are supposed to talk about these things. That's why we do these podcasts. We're not talking about religion. We're not talking about politics. We're talking about cardboard. We're talking about collecting. We are entitled to have our own opinions when you express them in the right way. And I hope that you feel right about your opinions. I feel right about mine. Another thing I always get, Dave, I think the number one thing I get from, I don't get it personally, but I hear it from modern collectors, is vintage cards are going to die in the next 10 years. Vintage cards are going to, dude, give me a break. I'm 44 years old. If everyone my age dies in the next 10 years, well, maybe. I plan on living until I'm 80 at least, okay? So I got 40 more years, and everyone in my age group who collects vintage cards is still going to be buying up all the vintage cards we can for the next 40 years. There is no possible way that there's just gigantic shift away from vintage unless we all die off. Unless all us 40 sums die off, and trust me, I mean, look, even if all 40 sums died off, there's plenty of people who collect, not invest. They collect baseball cards. They will go, and they love history. They will go deeper into cards. They will go back in time. Where I'm going forward in time, I started collecting modern. Guys go backwards, guys go forward. It's collecting. There's nothing's just going to die off. Modern cards aren't going to die off. There'll be a crash one day, whether that's a year from now or 10 years from now, and that's going to include vintage. That's going to include all baseball cards. Economy crashes, cards crash. Vintage cards will be collected forever. Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, everyone, even the commons, because there's sets that are in particular. And Dave, let me show you a card from 2007 I have a red refractor as well, Mickey Mantle. You just showed one. So, there we go.
Yeah.
You got, who was the guy you showed?
That was Chris Carpenter, an old Cardinals pitcher.
Oh, Chris Carpenter. Oh, yeah, absolutely know Chris. That guy was sharp. Yeah, so yeah, I love it, right? I get to collect my vintage guy on the modern collection, and you got your Chris Carpenter.
What's so funny is I just heard it, and I can't remember who said it or what podcast it was, but somebody asked the question, because right now 90s cards are really hot, and somebody said, do you think that 90s cards are going to die out as that generation gets older? And people in the teens, they're talking about like that 2018 class of Acuna, Soto, Ohtani, right? So this was a younger person. And it was the exact same way that questions are phrased about vintage. But it was just pushed up a number of years, 30 years, to be talking about 90s cards, right? And I'm sure in the year 2054, someone's going to say, do you think that at some point people who like Bobby Witt Jr. are just going to be, dying off? They're not going to care about it? No, because there are people now who collect furniture from the 16th century. Right. There's an appreciation and knowledge there, and interest in it. Maybe, who knows, right? And maybe there are some players who people will forget about, but there are some players who people will always, who are eternal, right? Mickey Mantle is eternal. Hank Aaron is eternal.
Well, and the thing is,
that will be eternal, but maybe L. Kaline, I don't know. Maybe he'll slip through the cracks at some point. But
he's already slipped through the cracks. That's the thing. He's still collected. He's still loved by vintage collectors. He's still loved by people, but his prices have always been down here. And Eddie Matthews, all those guys have always been lower. They don't just slip. Everyone goes up together, comes down together. No one disappears. No one ever disappears completely. There's always that. You want to, like, I put my money into certain players, but those guys don't just go down. They're in the set. They're collected guys, and they've always been lower tier guys. They're not just going to all of a sudden be top tier guys, and they'll always be there. But they'll always come up as collecting comes up, and they'll go down with collecting. I don't see anyone just disappearing. People love history, and history doesn't stop. And the more we have access, like we do today, to podcasts, Audible books, you don't have to read. I suck at reading. I can listen. All kinds of things. History is going to become even easier to access as these generations get older. So for me, history is going to even be way more collected in the future because we have more access to it. We have more channels sharing vintage cards. There wasn't even channels before. So that argument to me is squashed instantly when in my brain, I go, I'm not dead. I'm not gonna, if I die, it'll be tragically, and not everyone in my age is gonna die in the next 10 years. This stuff is not going anywhere. That's argument's been made forever. And the 90s thing is funny you brought that up, because you mentioned that in your last podcast about you like kind of scared to maybe spend a little more money, like it might be peaking. I said that like a year and a half ago, because my buddy Adam, Splendid Sports, my co-host for Turn Back the Clock, we like to guess what's going to go up in the future. And I said, I think 90s cards, I think they will continue to rise as cards rise, like everything. But I think they had their huge giant jump. So I don't play in that game. I play in the 2000 because it's nostalgia for me as I was buying cards, but also because no one collects those cards as much as they collect the 90s stuff. And I think, I'm on that camp. Totally different subject, but I'm on the camp that 90s stuff already had their day in the sun. Like the PSA 9s and 10s, like a whole nother subject. But there's times to pull the trigger on things, and there's times to go in a different route. And that's what's great about collecting. If you collect enough stuff, you can just, okay, well, that stuff, like, I don't buy a lot of Aaron Judge stuff right now. I bought 2 for 2024, but I already collected his stuff. But now that he had another monster season, it's like, all right, take a rest. I'm not buying Ohtani stuff. I was selling it. And keeping just what I wanted. There's times to buy, there's times to sell. And as a collector, you only sell stuff that you accidentally bought or like, oh, I shouldn't have bought this. Or you want to make a big move like you did with your Jackie Robinson rookie card. That's what I love.
What are you looking? I mean, you have this enthusiasm. We all have the enthusiasm. What are you looking forward to in 2025 in terms of like your own collection? And not even just cards. Are you going to be going to any shows, talking to friends? What kind of stuff are you looking forward to for this year for cards?
I probably won't be going to a single show. I live on an island, so for me to go to a show, it costs so much money, so much time. I don't like being away from my wife, and we have a family, a family member who's been sick for 2 years. So my wife is full board taking care of my mother-in-law, and it's just one of those things, like being away, going to the National is really tough. So I won't be doing that. My goal this year, I won't be buying a lot of cards. I'm going to be completing my sets. I guess they call it a type collector. I don't even know. I think that's like where you don't go for an entire set. I heard it say the other day, I've heard type collector so many times, I've never actually looked it up. I don't even know what it means.
I don't know what that means either.
Collecting my whole life. I didn't even know what PC meant when I got on YouTube. PC? What the heck is PC? Like, what is this crap? I could do a whole video on what words I've learned on YouTube that I didn't know existed before. But I'm trying to finish my Topps Chrome, what I talked about early, Bowman Chrome. I have a Gaudy heads up set I'd like to continue completing. I have my MVP set. I'm trying to collect one card of, I have the whole 1975 Topps insert set. It wasn't an insert set, but I call it an insert set of the MVP cards on cards from 1975 Topps. I want to collect every card that was on those cards. I have a lot of them, and I'd like to continue to go down that. I bought my big card for the year already. And I'm trying to, this year is going to be a year to save money and focus on finishing little rabbit holes that I went on. And my Japanese collection of gum cards, that's a big one for me. Keep going down that rabbit hole. That's kind of my goals for the year.
That's great. Mine are very, very simple. I consolidated so many cards last year for the Jackie Robinson, and I'm just trying to buy cards this year. I just want to grow it out so that when I go to spend time with my cards, I'm not done in 4 minutes, right? And so I'm going down and just trying to build it out and buy cards that I like and cards that I think that I look cool of players who I enjoy. And then the other thing is that I'm going to try to work on my storage and my organization a little bit and my display, and I won't be able to have a cool shelf or a wall or anything like you and many others have. But for me, it's going to be binders and digital. And all the joy doesn't have to be from the mail day, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And to me, the cards speak to each other, and it's not just here's an individual card. Now I'm putting this away, and here's another individual card. I look at them and I make connections, but I like to connect them visually as well. So I think that's I've been putting that off for far too long. I've got a bunch of binder pages and binders that are sitting in my Amazon cart that has been sort of there for a while, and so I think that's where I'm headed.
So are you putting your for anyone out there, I do binders of my graded cards, and I put them in boxes, and so the cards are all hanging, so there's no pressure. I'm just weird like that. And these are like 200-pound boxes. I can't recommend doing this enough. Is binders for me are like magic. So what I'm doing, if you're listening, I'm pulling out a binder of my Mickey Mantle modern playing days cards, or modern, not playing days cards, my modern Mickey Mantle cards, and they're in a binder and they're graded. So I just use those Ultra Pro 5 1/4 sleeves.
So 4 slab cards per page.
4 slab cards, and you can fit about 44 if you really get them in there, if they're not all SGCs. And I just, like you say, each page I put cards together to create something. It's not just, it's like two of my favorite cards in my entire collection. This Mickey Mantle, and it's on my front page of that. I've got 2006. I have the printing plate where he's batting right-handed. Or I have it up, yeah. And then the regular, I have the blue refractor, and he's batting left-handed. And I have him in the binder side by side, and it's just magical. Like, and binders are fun like that. So another question for you, Dave. I know I'm probably going way longer than you normally do, but what I really love about like creating cards that go together is, so I'm a collector that gets the most joy from having the card. There's collectors that get the joy from hunting. I'm not a fan of hunting for a card. Like, dude, I hate wasting time sitting on the couch and looking on eBay. It isn't my thing. If I had a card shows to go to, Dave, it would be different. I love card shows. Like, those are like going to Toys R Us when you're a kid. But I don't have that experience. So if you're like me and you're at home, dude, I would just gladly pay the money to have the card. I get the most enjoyment from the card, from the item in my collection. That's where the enjoyment comes from me, not looking for that card. I'm maybe different than a lot of collectors. That's where my joy comes in. And then putting them next to the card that I wanted them to be next to is like next level cool.
That's I'm not a big hunter either. I just want to have it. And as I have a pretty long commute to work each day. It's about an hour 10 each way. And I'm driving, I'm just zoning out, and I make pairings in my head sometimes. Totally. Right? Of cards, yeah. It's like, oh, I want to do this, right? And it's like, Dave Winfield, George Brett, and I'll pull out 2 other players from the 70s, right? Who I think of when I think of 1970s baseball. I'm like, now which card? Well, clearly it's the 78 tops for Reggie Jackson, right?
Oh yeah.
But it can't be the Mike Schmidt, rookie, because I don't like that. It's, I wouldn't have just him on the card, right? So it's got to be like the second year. How am I going to do this? That's how I do it. And then I come home and I will open eBay, and I use eBay as a recreational activity, probably more than I should. And then I get a little frustrated. I'm like, why are the prices so much? Right? It shouldn't be this much, right? But I think that I love that the character of the vintage cards. I like rounded corners. I don't mind beat up edges. I do like it centered. I'm like you. I like it centered. It drives me nuts when it's off centered. But otherwise, I don't mind a little character. I think that's great. I think it tells you about the age and the history of the card.
Well, the rarity in Topps cards in vintage is centering. That's the only scarcity factor we have. There's the pop that I hate.
I was going to say pop and grading.
I never looked at freaking pop in my whole life until YouTube. I never even knew that existed. I never once went on PSA website, nothing, until YouTube. And I had 1,000 graded vintage cards before I got on YouTube. Vintage. And the rarity is centering. After hunting and going down the centering thing, I can't stress it enough. I would way rather have a centered card than a sharp card in a 7 or an 8, because 7s and 8s, dime a dozen. Centering, though, whew, some of these cards are impossible. But Dave, one last thing. So your pairing talk. So I have 4 cards from 2024 that I purchased so far, from 2024 Topps Chrome, and I just slabbed them up myself. I bought them ungraded, meaning, and I put them in my own Zion Mag Pros. And I thought of this when I bought these cards. I have a Mike Trout, and it's the
Are those Ray Waves?
Yeah, these are the gold Ray Wave. One is a Topps Gilded, numbered to 25. The other one is a Topps Chrome Aaron Judge Black Ray Wave refractor, numbered out of 10. And I put the information on the slab, like how rare they are, how hard they are to pull. But having these two side by side, like, is that not like, I literally, when I bought these 2 cards, I was like, dude, that is what I got them for, to put them on my desk side by side, put them in the album side by side. It's magical. That's what it's about for me. It wasn't the hunt. It was having them in my hand and grading them in my own slabs and doing this. So yeah, I get what you're going with that. I love that.
Very cool. Dylan, I could just keep going on and on for hours. But I've got, I think, a kid that needs me in the other room. So I'm going to end this now, and let's call this part 1, right? Let's call this the first installment, because I would love to do this again if you're up for it.
Likewise, I'll have you on my channel.
Count me in. Let's do it. Let's do it. So folks, check them out. Double D Vintage Baseball Cards on YouTube. Dylan, thank you so much. I love talking to you, and take care of yourself.
Thanks, Dave.